De las 10 nominadas a Mejor Película para los Oscars de este fin de semana, Tar fue una de ellas, que tiene a Cate Blanchett como una de las favoritas a ganar el Oscar a Mejor Actriz, y que tiene también 6 nominaciones en total, una de ellas para su director de fotografía, Florian Hoffmeister, con quien hablé sobre toda la película, desde cómo fue que se sumó a este proyecto y cómo fue que lo encararon, hasta también qué significa ese final para él y un montón de cuestiones más referidas a algunos análisis que se pueden hacer cada vez que veamos esta película, porque él la vio más de una vez, llamada Tar.
We now return to Mira Akien and Contre with our latest interview.
You know, when I really fell in love with cinema, it was a cinema of questions. You know, I grew up with the cinema of the 70s, of the 80s. You know, I adored Antonioni, and I mean, he was pre-70s, but anyways, so I adore him anyways. And those were films where in the end, sometimes you thought you forgot to answer the question because the question itself seemed, you know, not important anymore.
You want to dance the mask, you must service the composer.
When I read the script for Tar, it was very authentic in one way because it depicted the world of music. But there was also, it was clear quite early on that this film was about something else. But the something else very slowly came to the surface. Yeah. And it didn't have like a secret plot that would, you know, or that would pop up, or certain boxes were ticked. You know, it reminded me of those films. And I thought it was a great privilege that, you know, I was able to collaborate with Todd on such a project.
In 2013, Berlin elected Tar as its principal conductor, and she's remained there ever since.
You know, we talked a lot about authenticity, or maybe it's a big word, but say truth. Oh, yeah. Authenticity in my world, visual world, would be authenticity of space. So it was very clear that every space had to be really believable, and that we wanted to avoid any kind of cinematic texture through which we were to watch the film. It had to be very immersive and real. The juxtaposition to the authenticity was a sense of observation. Oh, yeah. So, you know, he felt, you know, he always, you know, he said sometimes, you know, we want to be like a fly on the wall. We just want to watch what's happening. And camera movement obviously is always a commentary. I mean, every image is a commentary in a way, but, you know, the subtlety of it was very important to us. And, you know, for example, in the orchestra, in the rehearsal sequences, you know, we decided never to move the camera. When there was music played, the camera could never move because it's one of our instincts. So it was very clear we don't want to do that. We want to hold it back. We want to establish a form of observation. And I think those two things, the authenticity and the observation, with, you know, on the level of the film, kind of were the equivalent to what the script was doing. So the authenticity would be immersive, and the observation would create this space in which your own thoughts could come up and you start putting things together.
She is one of only 15 EGOTs, meaning those who have won all 4 major entertainment awards. Thank you for joining us, Maestro.
Thank you.
There's, you know, subtle differences in terms of the way that also I did light her. So there's the official persona, the Lydia that, you know, appears in front of an audience, like in the beginning of the film, it's an audience of 1,000. And then the second scene, when she, you know, has lunch with her benefactor, Elliot Kaplan, it is maybe just an audience of 1, but it's still an audience. And in this light, you know, she is able to present herself in the way that she wants to present herself, and in a way she becomes maybe her own narrative. And those scenes she's lit very gloriously, and, you know, she shines and she has a strong key light. And then in those moments that are far more intimate, I try to keep it really soft and more in the shadow, you know, her in-town studio where she goes to compose, and where she also then you know, rehearses with a cellist. I think those were moments when there's real intimacy and the light becomes very soft. And I really wanted to create a feeling, you know, you could literally just be there, and it's very real and very immediate, you know. And there's one scene actually where both of those worlds collide.
Yeah.
And that is when she's going to the book reading in New York, because that's an audience. But if you watch that back, there's no key light. It's as soft and horrible, you know. It's just her in her complete fragility. And I thought that's an interesting moment, because then, you know, obviously the persona doesn't work anymore.
How's the writing going?
Not so well. I keep hearing something.
There was one scene when she goes into the office of her concert master to fire him, Sebastian. She goes into the office and she asks him, she confronts him, and then they sit down, and then he kind of yells at her, or he accuses her a bit, and then she gets really mad and she walks away. And that was one shot. You know, we just come in with her, we turn around, it's this wide shot, and we see these two people sitting there. And whilst they were rehearsing, I was outside the room just listening, and I just thought halfway through they're just chatting away. I thought actually they're chatting about the scene, because the naturalism was so finely tuned that to me there was no acting anymore, you know. So those things I thought. Or another scene that I absolutely love is when she opens the door to these people that try to sell the apartment, and they ask her not to play music, and she breaks into this really open, almost a bit like hysteric smile, a laugh. You know, she was just laughing, and closes the door. And that is so touching, you know, because it comes so much from the heart.
No. No, we wouldn't want that.
Again, I have to use the word privilege, you know, that it presented for me to be working with Todd and Kate on this, or to be part of this journey. I think both of them, you know, for him, I have a lot of respect, because he's a true auteur. So he took the leap. He jumped onto the white page. You know, that's like, he wrote it. He said, you know, day exterior, scene number 1. And as a director, he's terribly brave, you know, like some of these decisions to go with that little coverage and to trust the material to that extent is a very brave decision. So that's, you know, all that he brought to the table. And then Kate, as a performer, is tremendously brave, but she's also tremendously good. You know, she learned German, she played the piano, you know, in this long sequence at the Juilliard Music Hall when she teaches. I mean, that is like as difficult as a scene can get. You know, it's lots of words, it's long, you know, it's all kinds of emotional elements are in there. She plays it, not only does she play the piano, she also plays interpretations of that piece, you know, like Glenn Gould, or so she plays with the music. So if you work with somebody like that, obviously that, you know, raises the bar.
What does the dog mean for the movie? Like, why a dog? Why? It's like, my take is that she for once turns into the victim. She's no longer the predator. But why did you choose to like put that dog there?
That was just, you know, some of this is obviously driven by Todd's decisions very, very strongly, you know. So what he brought to the table, which was very invigorating for me, is I live in Berlin, but I haven't shot there in 15 years. I went to film school there, and then I left and worked mostly in Britain or abroad for British or American companies. And when we talked for the first time, I actually told him, like, why are you coming to Berlin to shoot this? This is a hard place to photograph. I've never been a real fan. You know, I really love London, and it's a place where you can just put up the camera. It's iconic immediately. Berlin is a bit more difficult. And yeah, but he had this fascination for Berlin. So it was really fun to go to actually revisit the place where I, you know, live and used to work through an eyes of a stranger that has this fascination. So then you go around, you visit the locations, and I, of course, have been in these derelict spaces. When I was young, I grew up in Berlin I moved to Berlin right after the reunification, and that's where we went to techno parties, so I've been there. But he had this real fascination for it. And then, we saw this basement, he picked it. Then we added the dog, that was Todd. And then the rest is a lot of intuition. And, we said, how would we want to play the space? How dark do we want to go? And I think the structure of the film allows an audience to project these interpretations into them, like you just said. For me, the moment is almost more when she actually falls down. When she runs up the stairs and goes bam. It's an open structure, and Todd said we should have a dog, and then we got the dog.
Yeah. And we can think whatever we want.
And I don't want to belittle it. I'm trying to describe it in a way that, because obviously we are very articulate in speaking about the film after we have made it. But there is also a moment, I sometimes think it's a little bit like making music. So there has been a theme established, like maybe in a good jazz band. And then there's variations, and there's also intuition involved, And when it comes to the cinematography, the intuition can be, for example, I've mentioned before, we had this limitation of camera movement. We didn't want to move the camera, in certain sequences. And there was one sequence where I remember where she comes back into the house of her childhood, and she goes into the living room, finds this old piano, and then she goes up the stairs into her own old bedroom. And we had set this up as a little tracking shot. The door would open, she'd come in, we wanted to track towards her. She goes to the living room, she plays the piano, we only hear it, she goes up the stairs. So we rehearse it, and we do it tracking. And then we say, let's track slower. Then we do another rehearsal. We say, let's start the track later. We do another rehearsal, and we say, let's not track. That is I think because we had tuned ourselves to this subtle sensitivity, that we were super alert to things. And then the intuition, or the process of intuition, then is that you then apply it to each challenge that comes to you. But it's not only from the head, it's like a bodily experience. What I enjoy when I watch it is that it changes its shape, so I can watch it a few times. Not that you have to watch it a few times, but there's a substantial confidence to it that allows me to discover other elements when I watch it repeatedly, and I don't get bored. And I do think that, we live in very complex times. And I think it's a very interesting achievement that a film can contemplate this without being too much driven into a very overplotted story. It kind of, when you say, we so easily say about things, that's very complicated. How could I ever explain this to you? And this film does, explain, not explain, but say it reflects on certain themes on a level where I think people would have said before they saw it, how would we ever tell that story in a film? And I think that it really does well. And I think, that's why people, I think, are enjoying it, because they see themselves, and maybe their own doubts and insecurities in, how to live a life in these times. What I always thought, and that was already on the script stage, was that last shot to me is like the metaphor. When we travel back from the stage into the audience and everybody wears a costume.
Sisters and brothers of the Fifth Fleet, it's time. I'll keep my farewell brief.
It was like, what's your narration about yourself? What's my costume that I wear? What's my hat? And it does it with a smile. It does it with it's a humorous moment, and it has humanity.
Yeah.
It has there's warmth there, and that's what I really loved.
Yeah, I think it has something to say about cancel culture. Like it's like a second chance for her after like she. Do you discuss this like about like?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one thing we actually did talk about. This in my very first meeting with Todd. It was in a little coffee shop in a coffee place in Berlin, and I asked him, so what is this ending light, or and he said, well, I don't remember what he said specifically, so I don't want to misquote him, but it was clear that there's different ways of reading the end. One way is, of course, that's a defeat, but then it can be a complete liberation because she loves music and she has liberated herself of the structure. It cost her everything, but she's liberated of the structure that also catered to these to that behavior. So she is, that's because I think that's an interesting thing about the film is to realize what a structure this orchestra actually is, the hierarchy of it, and that certain things just operate in a certain way. And obviously she has left that world, and so it's maybe a liberation as well.